Hi, welcome back, everyone. This is your friend Greedy Fanfics, bringing you another fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the third part of What If Deku Had a Twin Brother. All credit for this story goes to Chocolate Sisterling, so please support them by checking out the link in the description for more details. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. Now, let's get into the fanfic. When Izuku answered the door, he expected one of the members of the League of Villains. He had not expected the face of a stranger. A woman with long black hair and small horns that curved back from her forehead smiled excitedly at Izuku. "Can I help you?" he asked. She laughed wildly and jumped at Izuku. He dodged and leapt to the side while pulling out one of his knives. "Izuku!" The woman pouted before her face melted away to reveal toga. "I just wanted a hug." Izuku face-palmed before tucking the knife away. "Why are you like this?" The blonde girl shrugged as she flicked away the last of the goo from her disguise. "You should be used to me by now." "Sure." At least she was wearing clothes this time. "Do you know if anyone else is coming?" "Yep." She skipped happily into the living room. "We decided to stage our arrivals and wear disguises." "Probably smart," Izuku muttered. It would still be nice to know who was coming, but he got the feeling Toga had no plans on telling him. A few minutes later there was another knock on the door. This time Izuku immediately recognized Spinner. The oversized hoodie and glasses did little to hide his distinct gecko mutation, but Izuku supposed there was not much that would hide it. Spinner was barely in the door before Dabi arrived behind him. At least Dabi had a scarf covering his scars and was wearing a new jacket rather than the ratty black one he liked. "Can we get started now?" Dabi asked as soon as he was inside. "Is anyone else coming?" Izuku peered into the empty hallway. "Nope, this is it," Toga declared as she jumped on Izuku's back. 3 members. Only half of the people Izuku had spent months living with had come to hear him out. He had known it was probably overly optimistic to hope for Shigaraki, but a part of him had thought twice would come. It was no surprise Compress stayed away. Dabi, on the other hand, had been a bit of a surprise. "I am here to hear you out," Spinner stated. "But for now my loyalty still lies with Shigaraki. I've seen his passion and want to be part of the world he strives to create." "Create," he says, yet all Shigaraki talks about is destroying. "Right," Izuku muttered. "Twice said he wanted to come, but then at the last minute started yelling that he was never leaving the base. He's been having a tough time keeping things together since the big fight with our new allies," Toga commented while twirling one of her knives like a fidget toy. "Enough chit-chat," Dabi said with a roll of his eyes. "I smell food." "Oh yeah?" Izuku led the way to the kitchen. "Kaken made curry." As they entered, Katsuki glared at them from his spot next to the stove. He had 2 plates of curry and rice in his grasp. One was shoved into Izuku's hands. "Serve yourselves, losers," Katsuki growled at their guests, as he stomped over to the table with the other plate. Izuku gave a sheepish shrug and followed his friend. The hesitant peace of the situation only lasted until everyone was seated and Toga took her first bite. No sooner had the food hit her tongue than she was screaming and grabbing her water. "It burns!" she cried before chugging her water and running back to the kitchen for more. Katsuki cackled evilly and gave a challenging look to the other 2 villains. "Go ahead. Try the food." Izuku rolled his eyes and started eating. His own mouth burned a little, but it was bearable and the flavor was great. Growing up around Katsuki meant being exposed to spicy food from a young age, so of course he had built up a bit of tolerance, though not as much as Kaken. Spinner eyed the food with obvious fear, leaning back in his chair as if the curry would jump off the plate and attack him. Dabi, on the other hand, scooped some into his mouth without worry. "Huh!" he huffed after swallowing. "Here I thought all my taste buds were burned off just like the nerves in my scars, but this actually tastes pretty good." "You're insane," Toga panted from the sink where she had just had her mouth under the faucet. She looked at Katsuki. "Why would you feed us something like this? Is this some sort of revenge?" "Maybe," he answered. Izuku let out an exasperated sigh. Kaken loves spicy food. This is how he normally makes his curry. Sorry for not warning you. He gave a slight glare while meeting each person's gaze. Now can we please move on to the main reason you all are here? Sure. Spinner pushed his plate away before sitting normally in his chair. You mentioned the other day that you planned to tear down the hero and villain system. Yes. Izuku folded his hands on top of the table as he watched Toga return to her seat. He used his quirk to keep an eye on everyone's emotions as he spoke, but did nothing to manipulate them yet. I know it has been a while since you guys were in school, but when you were there, what did everyone want to be when they grew up? A hero, Dabi spat out. Izuku nodded. Right now being a hero is seen as the ultimate goal that everyone should strive for. Because of this, a person's worth is considered dependent on how suited they are for that profession. That's why there are so many fake heroes out there. Spinner griped. It seemed he still held to Stain's principles to some degree even after being persuaded to Shigaraki's cause. That would be useful. The same idea applies to villains. Today, every criminal is labeled a villain. I once heard Kamui Woods call a would-be purse snatcher pure evil. People's motives are not even examined anymore. They are simply shoved into a box based on their quirk and the circumstances of their lives. This idea has hurt every one of us at this table. Dabi gave Izuku a skeptical look. I get that these two were seen as monsters for their quirks. He motioned to Toga and Spinner. And you were bullied for not having a quirk. But how does this apply to Mr. Perfect Hero student? He pointed a thumb at Katsuki. Izuku went to reply, but Kaken beat him to it. It's true I have what was seen as a perfect quirk for being a hero, but that's all people saw when they looked at me. I got away with all kinds of crap because no one wanted to stand in the way of a future top hero. Deku was one of the only people who saw me as a person and not just a quirk. And for that I made his life miserable and did everything I could to tear him down. But no one even bothered to tell me that was wrong. If anything, they all encouraged it. The way our society is hurts everyone, Izuku supplied. That's why Kaken and I want to change it. We want to build a world where people are valued as a whole rather than just for their quirks. Toga squealed in excitement, and Spinner looked contemplative with his emotions subdued in thought. Dabi just radiated amusement. Noble words aren't going to be enough to change the system. Hope you have a real plan somewhere along the way. I wouldn't have invited you all here without one. Izuku folded his hands on the table. The first step in destroying the hero and villain system will be with destroying most of the heroes and prominent villains. Finally, Dabi seemed a little intrigued. Oh? You really think you can take out the top-tier heroes? If I'm not mistaken, it's a goal that lines up with your own, Dabi. Dabi leaned back and shrugged. Well, I did join the League to uphold Stain's philosophy. Get rid of the false heroes and all that. Spare me the false idealism. Izuku cut in. He could feel that Dabi's emotions did not follow his words. He did not actually care about false heroes. There is only one hero you really care about getting rid of, Toya. How? Dabi's eyes narrowed as he sat up. How do you know that name? It was just logical. I already knew how you felt about the current number one hero. You hate him in a way that has to be personal. Then there was the files on Endeavor's family that I got from the Hero Commission. The eldest son was assumed dead, but they never found the body. If we ignored the scares, you also have a striking resemblance to the youngest Todoroki brother. Seriously? Kaken whispered from his seat next to Izuku. Izuku did not look at him, but he could feel his friend's shock. In fact, he could feel shock from everyone beside Dabi, who mainly seemed annoyed and distrustful. Izuku needed to handle this carefully. I can help you get your revenge. Destroy Endeavor's reputation and put an end to him. Izuku used his quirk to nudge the distrust down ever so slightly and increase the curiosity. Why would I need your help? You think you can hold your own beside me and take on the number one hero? Dabi scoffed, but there was some genuine curiosity in his words. Toga may have taught me a bit about fighting, but I have no delusions about being on your level there. My talents have always been elsewhere. Izuku smiled. The nerd has always had a terrifying mind. Kaken stated. You guys were idiots for not putting it to use. I've been analyzing heroes from the time I was old enough to write. Do you know what that means, ᴠᴚ? ᴠᴚ's curiosity was piqued without Izuku needing to interfere. I have a feeling you are about to tell me. It means I already have knowledge of all the top heroes. Their strengths and, more importantly, their weaknesses. Izuku grabbed the notebook he had been working on earlier from where he had left it near his seat and flipped it open. Not that he needed the notes, it was really just to make a point. Endeavor's greatest weakness with his quirk may be his tendency to overheat when using it too much, but that is far less useful than the weaknesses in his character. I am confident I could cause his demise with the resources at my disposal already, but with you it would become easy. So that's it. Just exploit the flaws in his personality and quirk. What could go wrong with that? ᴠᴚ scoffed. Izuku could feel him pulling away. I'm not about to lay out the whole plan for you without some commitment in return, Izuku stated. But if you are questioning my abilities, perhaps we could look at yourself as a fellow fire user and how I would kill you. That seemed to set everyone on edge, but Izuku was not worried. He knew a show of strength might be needed, and Izuku was done questioning his own planning abilities. Your greatest physical weakness is that you lack resistance to heat. I could exploit that by forcing you to use your own quirk to a point that would kill you or force you to pass out. But your personality makes that not even necessary. You have a bad habit of using your fire without thinking about what it would do. Let's say you were trapped as a metal box. What would you do first? Melt my way out, obviously. ᴠᴚ scoffed. Let's look at how that would work for you. If the box were 5 feet by 5 feet by 6 feet, it would hold about 150 cubic feet of air. A little less with you taking us some space, but I'm going to ignore that in order to keep the numbers simple. That is about 4,200 liters of air, and since the air is about 20% oxygen, it would be about 850 liters of oxygen. Calculating the rate at which fire consumes oxygen is tricky, but the bigger and hotter the flames, the faster it would burn up. You would only have a few minutes before the fire burned up all the oxygen. The problem is you also need that oxygen to breathe. If the box were made of something like tungsten that has a melting point far above your normal flames, or even stainless steel that you can barely melt, it would be easy to make sure it is thick enough that you would suffocate before melting through. That is if you don't fry yourself alive in the process. There was a moment of silence before Toga piped up. Dang, that's cold. You would really murder ᴠᴚ like that? I would never attack my friends, Izuku answered with a smile. He could tell from the shivers around the table that they caught that this was not a real answer. ᴠᴚ gave a hesitant chuckle. Sounds like I'm definitely better off on your side. Consider me convinced. When are we killing Endeavor, boss? Izuku let himself relax ever so slightly. We will get there. First, we need to get everything together to destroy his reputation at the same time. And in the meantime, I have one more person to recruit. Izuku checked one more time to make sure the earpiece was all the way in, then pulled at the side of his hair to try and cover it. Stop fiddling with it. Kaken growled. You'll just draw attention to it. Right. Sorry. Izuku cleared his throat. La Brava, how are things looking on your end? Piece of cake. La Brava chuckled through the earpiece. Turns out I hacked this system before. They didn't even upgrade the security that much. Getting back in was simple. And the cameras we need? By the time you get there, I will have everything ready. Having La Brava on the team really made things so much simpler. Sure, Izuku was decent at hacking, but she was beyond expert. Hey, nerd. Kaken cut in. You sure this ice guy will be worth fighting? Well, Izuku put a finger to his chin in thought. ᴠᴚ has apparently been sparring with him since the League joined forces with these people. Reading between the lines of what he said, they are pretty evenly matched. So, I expect him to be a rather challenging opponent. If you would rather spar with ᴠᴚ, I can probably arrange that. No. Kaken's voice was firm, but gave nothing away of the fear Izuku could sense spiking inside him at the mention of fighting the scarred man. Kaken was rarely scared of a fight. Thinking back, Kaken had seemed a little uncomfortable when they all met at the apartment the other night. Maybe it was something to do with when the League kidnapped him. Izuku would have to dig into what the cause of this was. For now, they had a mission to finish. Deep in the mansion used by the Paranormal Liberation Army was a training room where Ģīton, the ice user Izuku had heard about, waited for them. Ģīton's cold silver eyes looked at Izuku as if he were a pile of rotten garbage that he just stepped in. It had been the common response from the liberation group since they learned that Izuku was quirkless. At least, supposedly quirkless. Izuku had no interest in letting them know about the quirk All for One gave him. Don't look at him like that. Kaken barked. You think you're so great? Then prove it. Sparks popped in Kaken's hands. You may have a decent quirk, Ģīton replied. But without the skills to use it, you too are inferior. He lifted his chin and looked down on Kaken with clear disdain. Izuku did not need to check to know that would tick Kaken off. The two started sparring with an intensity that was sure to leave damage to the room, and Izuku used the opportunity to leave. Whether Kaken won or lost, it would not be a short battle. It gave Izuku plenty of time to finish what he came for. Izuku walked slowly, but purposefully through the halls. In his ear he could hear La Brava giving him updates. Twice just left the room along with Toga. Your target is all alone. Oh. He's laying down for a nap. This will make my job even easier. Also, the cameras are now blind to your location. Izuku nodded slightly as he approached the door he had been looking for. He stopped just outside. All set? You are good to go. La Brava confirmed cheerfully. With a deep breath, Izuku opened the door. He only made it one step inside before a surprisingly sharp-edged feather pressed against his throat. Ever heard of knocking? Asked the hero laying on the couch. Sorry. Izuku raised his hands in surrender. I guess I was too focused on making sure all the cameras and sensors hidden on you would not pick up our conversation. The hero, Hawks, sat up and studied Izuku. The feather he was controlling did not move from Izuku's neck. Aren't you that hero's student's evil twin? The one that joined the League of Villains? Why would you want to keep secrets from them? Would you prefer that your connection to the Hero Public Safety Commission get revealed to everyone? I'm sure the people here would love to know you're actually a spy. Izuku smirked slightly. I'm not looking for a fight, just a conversation. Why don't you lower the feather and we can talk? Surely the number 2 hero isn't scared of a quirkless teen. Izuku reached for Hawk's emotions. He let the suspicion remain, but pushed down the unease just a bit while elevating the curiosity. Or at least tried to. The emotions did not react as much as they usually did. Slowly, the feather lowered and returned to Hawk's wings. What exactly would you want to talk about? The unethical way the HPSC raised, recruited, and essentially enslaved you. Izuku smiled brightly. He moved to lean against the wall opposite Hawks. Oh? Hawks tilted his head curiously. His actions were nonchalant despite the tension in his emotions. And what would you know about that? Quite a bit, actually. Izuku let his smile drop into a more serious expression. Reading your file was a surreal experience. I knew the HPSC was messed up, I just didn't expect child trafficking to be on their list of crimes. It wasn't trafficking. Hawks protested. Legally, it was adopting a kid who came from a bad living situation. Sure. Izuku let sarcasm drip from the word. And how do they justify all the payments to your mom? Anyone who looked at this from the outside would see it as buying a kid from his parents. And that is even without all the strict training that was closer to abuse. Add in that they use you as an assassin, and things really don't look good. Hawks studied Izuku. If you were really planning to spread that around, you would have already. So why come talk to me about it? You have said that your goal is to live in a world where heroes have more time that they know what to do with. I want to create a world like that, and I think you can help me. Hawks burst out laughing. I think your pitch could use some work, kid. That sounded really cliché. Heat rose in Izuku's cheeks. I was just trying to be persuasive. No, you were trying to be manipulative. Honestly, I've heard way worse from villains in the past. but I know an over-prepared speech when I hear one. Hawks leaned forward and squinted at Izuku. So how about you be straight with me and tell me what you want? Well, now Izuku's whole plan was out the window. Looks like it's time to improvise. Based on Hawk's reactions so far, honesty was probably the best option. This society is broken. It creates most of the villains and encourages horrible prejudices. It needs to change, but not through total destruction like Shigaraki plans. It needs to be changed at the very roots. Heroes and villains have both gotten out of control. It's all anyone cares about. Let's say I agree. Hawk's face stayed neutral, but Izuku could feel some curiosity and discontent inside him. What's your grand plan to fix things? Izuku smirked. It's cute how you're trying to get me to spill all the details. But to get those you have to join me. And I mean actually join me, not be a spy like you are here. All you're getting for now is the general goal. Destroy both heroes and villains while showing this society that their reliance on heroes and their reverence toward powerful quirks is idiotic. Quirks are simply tools. A person's worth does not depend on them, and only once we recognize that will we be able to build a better society. Such noble ideals. Hawks leaned back with his arms behind his head. The perfect image of relaxed. But his emotions were filled with doubt and cynicism. Really expect me to believe you can pull that off? You might be surprised what I can pull off, Takami-kigo. At hearing his name, Hawk's eyes widened slightly. Izuku pushed himself off the wall and took a step closer to the hero. How do you think I know about your history? You clearly have a very skilled hacker working with you. Unless you were lying about blocking the camera feeds. Hawk seemed far more reserved in his response now. Izuku could feel unease, but when he tried to pull and push at the emotions, it didn't work. Izuku's mind raced to try and understand what was happening with his quirk as he kept talking. I do have a skilled hacker, but that would not have been enough. Sure, she could have gotten access to the official file. The one that talks about the commission taking in a poor underprivileged child and nurturing his desire to be a hero. But it takes physical access to get your real file. The one that tells how much money your mother was paid to sell you. The one that talks about pushing a child to train until he can't move and denying him food or basic comforts when he fails. I already told you I knew about what they did to you. Even when talking about something that was no doubt traumatic, Hawk's emotions were under control. That's when it hit Izuku. The HPSC had trained Hawks to control his emotions to a point that Izuku would not be able to nudge them significantly without making it obvious. Looks like he was doing this without his quirk. I know what it is like to go hungry. To be hurt by the people who are supposed to take care of you. I know what it's like to have blood on your hands and tell yourself that it had to be done. Izuku studied Hawks carefully as he asked, "Do you even know the number of lives you have taken?" The hero seemed to crack just the slightest bit as his hands tightened into fists. None that can be proven. With a sigh, Izuku let his shoulders drop. It's all in that file. You weren't even out of school the first time they sent you to assassinate someone. You were a child. And how did you get this file? There was anger and frustration boiling under the surface. The emotions were still controlled, but far stronger than anything Izuku felt from the hero so far. I infiltrated the HPSC headquarters and took it over. Izuku stated matter-of-factly. Shock, denial, Hawks wasn't even trying to hide the emotions this time. How? I would be happy to tell you all the details if you decide to join. The point is, I am very capable of doing whatever I put my mind to even without a quirk. I am willing to do whatever it takes to make sure kids like us can be seen for more than their quirk status, and that this cycle of hatred and control gets stopped. Will you join me? Hawk's unblinking gaze stayed on Izuku as he sat in thoughtful silence for several long seconds. You really have control of the Hero Commission? I do. And I can use that to break their control of you. What happens from here is your choice. Hawk's emotions were a swirl of conflict before resolving into certainty. Hawks gave Izuku a confident smirk. Then count me in. Izuku hoped that the hero was being genuine. No way you can be a hero with a quirk like that. Shinsō paused in his walk to the elevator when he heard Kaminari's words from the common room. Were they talking about him? He thought that this class was different. That they wouldn't judge him for having a brainwashing quirk. Was he wrong? Nah, dude, Kirishima piped in. The whole point of the channel is that you can't judge what people will do by their quirks. I bet this one's a hero. What channel? Shinsō moved toward the couches where the other two were sitting. What are you guys talking about? Kaminari held up his phone. There was a paused video on the screen. Hero or villain? It's this YouTube channel that talks about a person's quirk, and you're supposed to guess if they're talking about a hero or a villain, then at the end they tell you. Though sometimes there are heroes and villains that have very similar quirks, and then the answer is both. Shinsō's first thought was that the channel was all about furthering stereotypes, but then he remembered what Kirishima had just said. What quirk is this one about? Shinsō asked. I'll show you. Kaminari backed the video up to the beginning and motioned for Shinsō to sit next to them. As soon as he was seated, the video was played. On the screen was a man with silver hair and mustache. He wore a dress coat with a ridiculously large collar. Good morning, viewers. I am Gentle, and today we will be talking about a quirk in a new category. This is a mental quirk. These kinds of quirks can vary from something as simple as increased intelligence, to reading or even manipulating other people's thoughts. The quirk my wonderful sponsor chose today is called fear induction. When this quirk manifested, everyone in the room with the child had full-blown panic attacks. At the peak of the user's ability, they could cause such panic in a target that within seconds the target would lose consciousness. It was theorized they could even cause someone to die if the fear was enough to make their heart give out. Gentle spread his hands wide and gave the camera a knowing smirk. So, now it's time to make your guesses. Was the user of this quirk an hero? A villain? Or simply a law-abiding citizen? Pause the video and leave a comment with your guess. Kaminari paused the video. Okay. So I get that the quirk does not make the person a villain, but there is no way you could be a hero. They could be just a normal person. Shinsō pointed out. Yeah. Kirishima did not look convinced. But if they were just a normal person, how would they know what they could do at the peak of their power? Okay. Kaminari held up a hand. So I say villain, Shinsō says normal person, and Kirishima says hero. Let's see who's right. They watched carefully as the video was played. Gentle took a deep breath. Now that you've all had a chance to guess, the answer is... He paused dramatically. An underground hero. A picture appeared on the screen of a woman in a black bodysuit with red highlights and a red mask. Her hero name was Night Dream, and she specialized in taking down human trafficking rings. From a young age she had to learn how to help people calm down when scared, and this was a huge tool when dealing with terrified children. So remember, quirks don't define a person. Our hearts do. This is Gentle signing off. See you all next time. The video ended and Kirishima smiled. Told you it would be a hero. Kaminari groaned. I thought for sure that one would be a villain. Shinsō was still staring at the phone. Is this channel new? I've never heard of it. Fairly new, Kaminari answered. But they put out new videos every day, so there's a ton of content, and they really blew up a few weeks ago. There was this video about all the top 10 heroes who have villains with similar quirks. You'd probably like it, Kirishima pipes in. It really shows people that quirks aren't necessarily heroic or villainous. They're just tools. I know it has a lot of people talking. Shinsō smiled at the other two boys. Yeah, I'll check it out. It was puzzling how this anonymous author managed to get the articles put in front of everyone. Niza was certain that either bribery or a skilled hacker was behind the widespread. He also was surprised the Hero Commission had not contacted him to track the source. The articles were well written and compelling, but each pointed out more of the flaws in society. From the dangers of quirk discrimination to the flaws in hero worship, this author was pointing out everything the Commission had worked hard to suppress and hide. If these articles continued to gain popularity, it could potentially undermine the foundations of their society. If done carefully, this could lead to reform in the system to make things better. But ᴄᴟ did not hold out hope for such care. The most likely outcome of attention being drawn to these flaws was civil unrest. People could become disillusioned with Hiro's society. The recent retirement of All Might along with the general distaste for the new number one hero would also add to that movement. ᴄᴟ scrolled through another discussion board where people were questioning the trustworthiness of heroes. Many people were coming out with stories about classmates or coworkers who were driven to acts of villainy by quirk prejudice or failure to live up to expectations for heroics. It was a sad reality that ᴄᴟ had long been aware of. Of course, these articles spoke to the many people who had been exposed to the uglier sides of their society. The motion detector in the hall informed ᴄᴟ that someone was approaching his office. The camera showed Snipe and Midoriya. Snipe did not look happy and Midoriya had the slightly terrified expression most students get when brought to the principal's office. ᴄᴟ opened the door remotely right as the two arrived outside. "Welcome," ᴄᴟ chirped. "How can I help you two today?" "Unfortunately, it appears Midoriya has plagiarized a large portion of his most recent paper for the quirk usage and analysis class," Snipe growled out. ᴄᴟ narrowed his eyes and studied the student. Midoriya's green eyes were glossy with unshed tears and his shoulders trembled slightly. ᴄᴟ was not the best at reading humans, but from his studies this looked more like fear than guilt. The question remained, was the fear from being caught or something else? "Is this accusation true, Midoriya?" "No," the boy nearly sobbed out. "I would never plagiarize or cheat in any way. I don't even know what I supposedly copied from." Snipe held out the paper and questioned to ᴄᴟ. "Large passages of the paper are strikingly similar to those anonymous articles that have been drawing so much attention. There is even a personal story that involves the same names and events." The principal's beady eyes scanned the pages quickly. As he read, Midoriya spoke up again. "I don't know what articles you are talking about. Everything in that paper is based on my own experiences." ᴄᴟ quickly found the story Snipe was referring to. A young boy who had a quirk allowing him to stretch his limbs. "Young Midoriya, can you tell me about the boy named Maro? I went to school with him." Midoriya glanced nervously between the principal and the floor. "His quirk allowed him to stretch his limbs. At first everyone said it was useless. He got called things like a stupid rubber band. But he was determined to prove everyone wrong. He worked really hard to improve his quirk. People started to say he might not be useless, so he pushed himself even harder. Even when his mom and others warned him that he was going too far, Maro refused to stop. He said he had to be a hero. Our first year of middle school, Maro was training with some other kids there to encourage him. They kept taunting that he had to prove he wasn't worthless, that he had to be a hero. Maro tore the muscles in his arms so bad that he had permanent damage. He could never use his quirk again." "Do you know the boy's full name?" ᴄᴟ asked. "Kawaguchi Maro." ᴄᴟ turned to his computer and looked up the boy in question. "Not only did you include details in your telling that were not in the original article, but you were also telling the truth about going to school with the boy." The principal turned his attention to Snipe. "I believe this may not be a case of plagiarism, but rather an author with similar experience." Realization shone in Snipe's eyes alongside something else. Perhaps disappointment. "Midoriya, did everyone in your class know about this?" Snipe questioned. "Not everyone." Midoriya curled his index finger against his chin in thought. "Maro was one of the few kids who was nice to me and Izuku when we were in elementary school, so we checked in with him after he came back to school. The kids who were there knew. His family knew." The boy's voice dropped into quiet mutters, but ᴄᴟ already had what he was looking for. "Snipe," ᴄᴟ addressed the teacher and cut off the students, muttering simultaneously. "Does the style of this paper match Midoriya's other writing in the past?" The teacher looked thoughtful for a moment. "It does. It was only the contents of the paper that seemed too similar to the articles online. And in light of the new information, do you still believe that it was plagiarized?" "No," Snipe grudgingly admitted. His body language still showed displeasure as he glared down at Midoriya. His tone was sour as he admitted, "I believe Midoriya is telling the truth." ᴄᴟ clapped his hands together. In that case, I believe we are finished here. I apologize so much for the inconvenience, Midoriya. He debated about having Snipes stay to address his attitude toward the student, but dismissed the idea. With a twin brother as a known villain, this sort of treatment was inevitable for Midoriya. While ᴡᴇ did not want his staff to behave like this, perhaps it was best for the child to learn to deal with it while ᴡᴇ was around to mitigate the potential damage. As the teacher and student headed back to class, ᴡᴇ sat back and looked at where the articles that started all this were displayed on his monitor. It seemed Midoriya Izuku had been quite busy lately. What are you after, Izuku? The principal mused. Years near the top of the hero charts required many hours of training and practiced control to avoid exhaustion. It required the strength to hide when he did feel exhaustion. This practice and control was why ⴅᴏ would never admit he was tired. But deep down he knew the truth. He was exhausted. There were always hard days. Days when it seemed every villain had it out for him. Especially now that he was the #1 hero, villains targeting ⴅᴏ was nothing new. Still, today seemed to be especially annoying. From hostage situations that required melting through 3 feet of steel to villains with natural resistance to fire, the whole world seemed determined to push ⴅᴏ past his limits and make him overheat today. ⴅᴏ needed to cool down, and that need was the only reason he took such a minor call as this disturbance in the warehouse district. The flames on his shoulders were as cool as he could let them get as ⴅᴏ entered the abandoned building. It was empty. Looks like a false alarm, he reported into his comm. There was no reply. No confirmation that his report was received. Dispatch, do you copy? He growled. There was only silence. You have to be kidding me. He stomped his way back to the door and slammed his hand down on the handle. It didn't budge. ⴅᴏ kicked the door hard enough it should break the latch. Nothing happened. Sweat dripped down ⴅᴏ's forehead, and he wiped it away. Why was it so hot in here? He had not even used his flames yet. Hesitantly, he lit an intense flame in his hand and tried to melt his way through the door. The flames should have been enough to melt steel easily, but the metal of the door did nothing. Having some trouble, ⴅᴏ? A gravely voice called from behind him. ⴅᴏ turned to find the villain Dabi standing in the middle of the empty warehouse. So this was all a trap, the hero stated. It was obviously true, but ⴅᴏ had been doing this long enough to know that a trap this elaborate probably had more to it. Getting the villain to monologue and reveal everything was not his usual style, but ⴅᴏ could really use a minute to rest. One just for you, Dabi said with a smirk. The #1 hero. Finally got what you always wanted, right? To be on top? ⴅᴏ clenched his fists. It was still a sore spot that he never truly overcame All Might. The #1 spot was given to him instead of earned. The villain kept talking. You wanted it so bad that you were willing to do anything to prove yourself. ⴅᴏ shifted away from the wall to have room for the inevitable fight. Dabi just kept talking. Anything. Even if it meant forcing someone with an ice quirk to marry you. Forcing her to birth your perfect heir. Where did you hear that? ⴅᴏ cried out. That was not public knowledge. Only his family knew. Dabi laughed and pulled a bottle of liquid from his belt, dumping the contents over his hair. What's the matter, Dad? Don't you recognize your eldest son? As the liquid poured out, it washed away the black color from his hair, leaving white behind. And as icy blue eyes pierced into ⴅᴏ's matching ones, he realized who was before him. Toya? Tashinori was in his on-campus apartment when the broadcast came on. He had left the news playing while he worked on grading his students' recent quizzes on rescue techniques. The news cut off suddenly and the villain Dabi was shown standing in what was probably an empty warehouse, judging by the size. He was spouting all kinds of accusations about the new #1 hero, ⴅᴏ. At first Tashinori wanted to deny it. He knew that prior to his retirement, ⴅᴏ had been determined to overcome him. But he would never have believed it could go as far as quirk marriage. When Dabi revealed his white hair, ⴅᴏ seemed to recognize him. It made dread settle in Tashinori's stomach. The broadcast cut to a video of Dabi showing all his scars as he told a story of how he was Endeavor's supposedly deceased son. How he and his siblings had been abused and abandoned. He even provided DNA test results supposedly using Endeavor's blood from a previous fight. For Toshinori, though, the biggest evidence were the documents from the HPSC. Of course, they did not directly tie Dabi to being Toya, but they confirmed what he said about the family while also showing that the commission knew about the abuse and did nothing. Years as the number one hero meant Toshinori had seen many classified documents from the Hero Commission. He recognized the heading, formatting, even the watermark and other ways of showing authenticity that no normal citizen would have the resources to accurately fake. A knock on his door pulled Toshinori from his shock. "All Might? Are you in there?" Young Midoriya called through the door. Toshinori quickly rose and let his successor in. "Come in, my boy. What can I do for you?" Young Midoriya walked in and stopped when he saw what was on the TV. "So you did see it?" "Yes." Toshinori moved to stand by his student. "It is quite shocking." Just then the footage switched back to show the hero and villain fighting. Or rather, Dabi beating Endeavor to a pulp. The hero barely seemed to be fighting back. Toshinori did not even notice Midoriya leaving his side until the boy was back and pushing a cup of tea into his hand. "Ah. Thank you, my boy." He sipped the tea as the fight continued. "If only I had the strength to help." Midoriya hummed thoughtfully. "I wonder why no other heroes are stepping in. It really is a shame. Looks like we will be losing another number one hero." The indifference in Midoriya's voice made Toshinori wince. He took a longer sip of the tea. "You don't sound all that worried, my boy. Is everything all right?" Midoriya laughed outright at that. "Of course. Everything is going exactly as I planned it." "What?" Toshinori turned to the boy next to him. Young Midoriya was wearing a sinister smile, one Toshinori had never seen on him before. "Oh, All Might. You really should be more careful about who you invite into your home. What will my brother do without his mentor?" Toshinori choked on blood. It was far more than he normally coughed up from his injury. His muscles were not listening as he fell to the ground. He could not get air into his lungs past the blood in his throat. Midoriya Izuku leaned over him. "Maybe now you know the pain I felt when you shattered my dreams only to give your quirk to my brother. Your actions destroyed my life. It only seems fair that I end yours." Izuku waited until the former number one hero stopped convulsing on the floor. There was a puddle of blood under his head. As he stilled, the emotions of pain, betrayal, and overwhelming fear faded. Izuku shook off the tension caused by sensing such strong emotions. All Might saw dead. 2 months of planning and preparation finally paid off. A glance at the TV showed that Dabi was standing over the body of the Endeavor and laughing. It looked like the plan had been successful. In one day, Japan lost both its number one heroes. All that was left was planting the evidence. Mikumo wiped tears from his eyes. All Might was gone. No one would tell him who did it either. Rumors said that it was a villain he had locked up years ago taking revenge. But if that was the case, why were they hiding it? Others whispered that it was a traitor or even the League of Villains again. Shoto dropped onto the couch beside him. His expression looked distant. That's right. Mikumo had been so caught up in his own mourning that he almost forgot Shoto had lost his dad. Mikumo knew that Shoto and Endeavor had not gotten along very well, but he was still his dad. How are you holding up?" Mikumo forced out. "I'm not sure," Shoto answered. "I hated my dad, but I didn't want him to die like that. And then there's the fact that Toya is alive." He shook his head slowly. "I just wish I could talk to him. Understand what happened to him." A hollow laugh slipped from Mikumo. "I know a thing or two about having a villain brother." Shoto hummed thoughtfully. "Maybe someday we can both get answers. Why am I here again?" Mikumo questioned as he stared uncaringly at the interrogation room table in front of him. "We found some concerning things after All Might's death," Detective Tsukachi stated. "Did you have any contact with him on the day of his passing?" "I saw him in heroics class. Mikumo thought for a moment. We also met at lunch to talk. Anything else? The detective pressed. Mikumo shook his head. That's all I can remember. Successor looked skeptical. Can you tell me what you were doing that night? Yeah. Wait. Mikumo's eyes went wide. You don't think I had anything to do with this, do you? I would never hurt All Might. We're just trying to get a timeline for what happened that night. The answer was very unconvincing. Did you leave the dorms that night? I did. Mikumo hesitantly answered. I went for a run. I got back while everyone was watching the broadcasts about Endeavor. That did not seem to be the right answer as the detective's frown deepened. Midoriya, have you had any contact with your brother recently? Mikumo froze. He should have told them about his run-in with Izuku. It was too late now. Why would you ask me that? I told you that I would report it if I had any new information. I didn't lie. Successor tilted his head as he studied Mikumo. Then answer the question. Have you had contact with him? No, Mikumo lied. He did not miss the way Successor's eyes widened slightly. Did you have any part in the death of All Might? Of course not, Mikumo yelled. I told you I would never hurt him. Then how did your fingerprints get on the mug he was drinking from? Air caught in Mikumo's throat. What? The mug he was drinking from. The one that contained the poison that ultimately killed All Might. It had your fingerprints on it. No, Mikumo shook his head. I didn't. I would never. You also said your brother would never hurt anyone, yet we know from Eri's own account that he is the one who killed the villain Shisaki Kai. That was different. He was saving a little girl from a villain. And besides, that has nothing to do with this. Doesn't it? The detective's voice was cold as he spoke. Your brother has already turned to villainy and proven that he is willing to kill. How do we know you aren't the same? I'm trying to become a hero. Mikumo could feel tears starting to form at the corners of his eyes. All Might was my mentor. He was my hero. I want to be just like him. A sob broke off his words and he had to take a deep breath to get it under control. I did not kill All Might. I had nothing to do with his death. Successor was still frowning at him. We will be continuing our investigation. In the meantime, you will be under house arrest in the UE dorms. As Mikumo was escorted out, he did not miss the way everyone in the police station was looking at him. The suspicion. The mistrust. They were looking at him like he was a villain. Katsuki lifted his hand to glare at the device strapped to it. It was a creation of Izuku's that gathered the sweat from his palms into a container. It reminded Katsuki of his old gauntlets. What are you planning to do with all this sweat anyway? Katsuki called to Izuku, who sat at the table across the room scribbling in one of his notebooks. When the nerd finally looked up, Katsuki waved his hand for emphasis, causing the explosive sweat to slosh around slightly. Izuku watched with a look of mild concern, as if Katsuki did not know exactly what would or would not set off the explosive liquid. Finally he answered. It's for one of the backup plans. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. They had already gathered enough sweat to decimate a small city. You better not be planning to use it to hurt innocent people. Of course not. Izuku gave him a sad smile. I know you would never forgive me if I did that. I promise that the only people I will target with these bombs are villains. You better be telling the truth, Katsuki muttered. He slumped back into the couch watching the liquid gather, and hoped he was making the right choice. Any questions? Izuku glanced over the people gathered in his living room. It was almost time to put his plan into motion, and this was likely to be their last meeting. Katsuki had claimed the overstuffed chair and lay sprawled in it. Hawks relaxed in one corner of the couch, and Dabi in the other, with Spinner sitting stiffly in the middle. Toga bounced around with too much energy to sit still, and Gentle and La Brava sat on chairs pulled from the kitchen table. They were all facing Izuku as he stood before them. Hawks smirked as he raised his hand. Do we get a vacation once this is all over? Katsuki scoffed. Seriously? That's your main concern? Not the fact that we are essentially playing both sides against each other in a war? I mean, Hawks shrugged. I knew from the get-go that this whole joint thing between the League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Front would not go down without a fight. Sure, Izuku's plan is a bit more extreme. But if it works, then things will change for the better. I can finally retire and relax just like I always wanted. Regardless, Izuku cut in, attempting to keep the conversation on track. Taking care of the doctor comes first. I'll also take care of talking to the commission to let them know I won't interfere with taking down the League. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, Hawks stated. And when the time comes, I have this. He held up a small red capsule. Toga threw her arms around Izuku's neck. And Dabi and I get to cause trouble. Everyone knows their part, nerd. Katsuki piped in. Stop stressing. I know. Izuku clenched his fists, then relaxed them as he took a deep breath. Kaken was right. Izuku just worried that he may have missed something. He glanced around. Hawks, Dabi, and Toga seemed almost too relaxed, while Spinner was tense and worried. Izuku debated saying something, but let it slide. In that case, I should get going before someone misses me, Hawks said as he stood from the couch. Come here so I can show you where to go to sync up the camera feeds, La Brava instructed. As everyone filtered out of the apartment, Dabi stopped in front of Izuku. Hey, thanks for helping me take care of the old man. Izuku gave him a small smile. You deserve justice. And obviously this corrupt system was never going to give it to you. Sure, and it had nothing to do with taking down an obstacle to your own plans. Dabi smirked knowingly. Izuku shrugged. It was a nice bonus. Soon all the League members had left for the Liberation Front hideout, and La Brava and Gentle headed to the apartment next door where they were staying. Izuku could hear Katsuki moving around in the kitchen. Izuku, how have you still managed to not go shopping? I've been busy? Izuku hesitantly answered. He winced. The excuse sounded weak even to his own ears. Sorry, Kaken. Well, congratulations. Katsuki's voice was filled with sarcasm. There is nothing to eat in this house. They decided to go together to pick up some food. The early spring weather was plenty cold enough for Katsuki to bundle up and hide his appearance without it seeming strange. Izuku still insisted that they go to a store farther from their apartment in case they were recognized. Izuku could feel Katsuki's frustration at the convoluted path of back alleys and buses that they took before finally reaching a small local grocery store. The store only had a few cameras at the front, and the owner paid zero attention to current events. Izuku had stopped there a few times in the past and never had an issue. Katsuki was being overly particular about the produce, so Izuku went to pick out some snacks while he waited. He was muttering to himself about the relative price and quality of two different chips when he felt someone move up behind him. You're Midoriya Izuku, right? Izuku spun around to find a pair of mismatched eyes staring at him from a face that was easy to recognize. Todoroki Shoto, Hero's student from UA. There was nowhere to run. This left Izuku with three options. He could try to pretend he was Mikumo, but it seemed Todoroki already knew that was not the case. He could play stupid and try to convince the other boy he was someone else, though the chance of that working was low. Or he could admit he was Izuku, and find out what Todoroki wanted. After all, if it came down to it, Kaken could probably help Izuku get away. You're Todoroki Shoto, right? He answered with a mirror of the boy's own words. Heard about your dad. It's a real shame. Is it? Todoroki quirked an eyebrow. Izuku tried to get a read on the hero's students' emotions. They were strangely repressed, but Todoroki did not seem overly upset when talking about his father's death. Is there a reason you have not called in the pro heroes yet? There was a chance the boy had called them, but he gave no indication that was the case in his face or emotions. I wanted to talk to you, Todoroki replied as if that was a good reason not to turn in a wanted villain. Izuku glanced around. They were still alone on the aisle, but he could feel Katsuki moving closer. We can talk. What about? My brother Toya. Though I guess you know him as Dabi. Are you close to him? The boy's lack of emotions was disconcerting. The only emotions Izuku could feel with his quirk were curiosity and uncertainty. but he wasn't sure if he could trust that with this guy. Close enough. Izuku studied Todoroki as he tried to guess what he was after. We are part of the same group. And we've helped each other out. Todoroki's heterochromatic eyes widened in a way that almost seemed pleading. Do you think I could talk to him? Why? The question was out before Izuku could even process it. I mean, you're a hero student and he's a villain. Plus he killed your dad and exposed all your family's dirty secrets. Todoroki looked away, seeming to collect his thoughts. I just want to understand him. We both went through the same things for the most part. I want to know why he chose to become a villain. The emotions behind the words seemed sincere, but that did not mean Izuku could just trust him. And what if you don't like his answers? Or perhaps a better question is, what if you do like them? What will you do if you find that his reasons for becoming a villain make perfect sense? What would you do then? Todoroki's mouth opened and closed a few times before he answered. I don't know. I just want to understand. Trying to understand can be more dangerous than you think. Katsuki's voice cut in from the end of the aisle. The scarf he had been wearing was pushed down to show his face. Sometimes, understanding makes it impossible to go back. But Kodo? This time Todoroki's surprise showed in both his emotions and his face. I thought that I was a prisoner? Katsuki walked toward them. If it weren't for Izuku, I still would be. Izuku helped me understand, and that left me with things I needed to make right. Who knows, talking to your brother might mean the same for you. I'm willing to take that risk. Todoroki's emotions were finally starting to stir, and show some of the inner turmoil Izuku expected. Meeting with you would be an even bigger risk for Dabi, Izuku pointed out. You could easily set him up and lead him into a trap. Todoroki clenched his jaw. There has to be some way I can convince him to at least talk to me. I'll talk to him and give it some thought. Izuku grabbed one of the bags of chips he had been looking at and walked over to drop it in Katsuki's basket. If he wants to meet, I'll be in touch. They started to walk out of the aisle, but Izuku stopped and turned back. While you're here, how is my brother doing? Sadness and frustration seeped out of Todoroki as he dropped his gaze to the ground. Mikumo is being detained. They suspect him of being a traitor, but don't have any proof. For real? Izuku blinked. How had he missed that important info? Of course he expected them to take some action after finding Mikumo's fingerprints and DNA at All Might's apartment. Planting the fingerprints had pretty much guaranteed trouble for Mikumo. Izuku just had expected them to drop it after Detective Lie Detector cleared him. Looks like he overestimated the heroes. They probably already suspected Mikumo because of his connection to Izuku. When Todoroki nodded, Izuku let his shoulders slump. I know it might be a strange request, especially from a villain, but can you be there for him? He really is innocent. I'll do what I can, Todoroki promised. In the distance, Shoto could faintly hear the sound of chanting, though he was too far away to see anything. He had heard from his classmates about the rally happening today. There had already been rumors of unrest before Endeavor and All Might were killed, but now the rallies and protests were practically daily. This one was supposed to be the biggest, a march to protest corrupt heroes and quirk discrimination. The closer Shoto got to the cafe, the fainter the chanting got. He stopped in front of the building and blinked. The word cafe seemed too nice for this rundown dump. There were patches of mismatched paint likely covering graffiti, and the sign was only half illuminated. Shoto briefly wondered if this was where he would die. Perhaps agreeing to meet here was a bad idea. Even if Dabi was not planning to kill him, would the food served at a place like this even be safe to eat? Shoto shook off the thoughts and pushed through the door. Inside the cafe was surprisingly nice. The walls were fully intact and the paint showed no signs of fading. Everything was clean and the tables looked sturdy. What really caught Shoto's attention was the scent of spices and fresh baked bread. It smelled delicious. It took a second sweep of the room to locate the figure in the corner. Dabi was barely even trying to hide. The hoodie covered his hair, but left his facial scars on full display. When their eyes met, the villain grinned and Shoto faltered. Objectively, this was a terrible idea. He was meeting with a villain in a remote location and no one even knew where he was, much less what he was doing. He could be killed or kidnapped, and no one would even know. Still, the need for answers drove him forward. He took the seat across from Dabi. No, not Dabi. Toya. He reminded himself. He was here because this was his brother, not just some villain. Glad you could make it, Toya said with a chuckle. Don't make a big deal of it. I just want some answers. Shoto narrowed his eyes. He had been young when Toya disappeared, but he remembered bits and pieces. The brother he remembered was always upset and desperate for their father's attention. It seemed a far cry from the carefree man in front of him who had murdered said father. Hard to give you answers if you just stare at me and don't ask anything. Toya leaned back and rested his head against the back of the booth. If all you want to do is stare, this is a waste of both our time. Where have you been all these years? Here and there. Toya shrugged. I was in a coma for a while due to nearly being burned to a crisp. Burned down the place I woke up in. Mostly been on the streets or whatever cheap apartment I can get into without ID since then. Shoto frowned. Why did you never come home? Are you kidding? Toya sat up straight. How could you, of all people, ask that? That house was not a home. I did check in on things. I wanted to see if my supposed death had changed things, but it hadn't. If anything, Dad was worse than before. Mom was in the hospital. Everyone was miserable. No way was I going back to that willingly. Shoto looked away. So you decided to become a villain? Not at first. Toya shrugged and relaxed again. I started out just looking for ways to survive. Didn't really get into the whole villain thing until Stain showed the example of killing fake heroes, and the old man was the fakest of them all. I had hated Endeavor for so many years and I finally had a way to direct that hatred and people willing to help me. That would make sense if he was the only person that you killed. What about all the others whose bodies they've found burned to a crisp? And what about the hero snatch that you killed when you attacked the transport for overhaul? Shoto kept his voice steady, but his hands curled into fists under the table. How are you anything more than a serial killer? You're feistier than I expected. I'm surprised Dad didn't beat that out of you. Toya smirked. To answer your question, most of the people I killed were just scum. Criminals who deserved what they got. As for the heroes I killed, you think Dad was the only bad one out there? The whole system is corrupt. I'm just doing what I can to change it. Didn't really know how to go about that at first, but now. Now what? Shoto leaned forward as he waited for the answer. I'm not going to say too much, but let's just say things are going to change. The protests going on are proof of that. People are starting to see just how messed up things are. It will only take a few more pushes for this hero society to crumble to the ground. The protests? Shoto felt his eyes grow wide. Is the League of Villains behind these protests? Something about Shoto's question must have been funny since Toya burst out laughing. You heroes really are a bit behind the times. The League wouldn't bother with little things like protests. There are much bigger things going on behind the scenes than you realize, little bro. Someone has been using articles and videos to bring people's attention to the problems in the hero system. It's only natural that people would be upset about all that. Someone? Like Shigaraki? It was hard to imagine the impulsive man from the USJ attack using those types of methods, but Shoto was not going to underestimate him. You really think Krusty Lips has the brains for that kind of manipulation? That is definitely not his style. I'm following someone else's plans these days. Someone who came up with the strategy to take down Endeavor. Toya leaned forward so his elbows rested on the table and stared straight into Shoto's eyes. I'm sure he would be happy to have you working with us too. It was tempting. So tempting to go along with it. Find out what this mysterious new leader had to say. No. Shoto stood quickly from the table. I'm not going to become a villain. The statement was as much to himself as it was to Toya. I understand why you chose this, but I can't. You don't have to. Toya stood as well. He reached out and rested a hand on Shoto's shoulder. It was warm and strangely comforting. That's the great thing about the world we're fighting for. In this new world, people will have a choice. That sounds nice. Shoto actually smiled a little. Maybe if you succeed, we can meet up more often. After that, they parted ways. All the way back to UA, Shoto could not help but wonder about this new world Toya was trying to build. A laptop sat open on the table in front of Izuku, displaying camera feed from inside the Hero Public Safety Commission. On the screen he watched in real time as the phone call he was making got picked up. "Good afternoon, Madam President." Izuku could not help but smile at the way the woman tensed on the screen. "How are the plans coming for taking out the Paranormal Liberation Front? I suppose you're calling to make me stand down." The HPSC president ground out through clearly clenched teeth. "Just because you have this thing around my neck doesn't mean I can stop doing my job." Izuku laughed as he leaned back in his chair. "Actually, it's quite the opposite. How much do you know about that group's ideals prior to their joining with the League of Villains? I have a feeling you already know the answer to that." She huffed. "They believe people should be free to use their quirks without limitation. Essentially, they are something like anarchists. To a degree, yes. But my issue with them is that they determine a person's worth by their quirk strength. I'm sure you can understand why that would be an issue for me." Izuku waited for that to settle. The commission knew that he was officially quirkless. That should answer any questions about why he was allowing this. "So you're saying that you will just stand aside and do nothing?" The doubt in the president's voice was certainly warranted. Izuku hummed thoughtfully. "Not exactly nothing, but I won't be getting in your way. I might even help you identify any members missing from your list. After all the trouble you went through to get us under your thumb, this seems a little too convenient." "Well," Izuku considered his words carefully, "I did originally have other plans for how to use your organization. However, that changed when Shigaraki decided to ally with a group that sees me as lower than dirt." The last sentence was practically spat out. Izuku tried not to think about it too much, but it really did hurt that after all he sacrificed for the League, none of it seemed to matter. From a practical viewpoint, Izuku understood why Shigaraki chose to join forces with the MLA to form the new Paranormal Liberation Front. That did not make it sting any less that Izuku was basically swept aside in the process. Maybe Kaken had a point about them not really being his friends. "They turned their backs on you, so now you are turning your back on them?" the president questioned. Her voice was filled with doubt. "More like, the PLF is a threat to my own goals. Taking them down benefits me as much as it does you." "And what goals would those be?" It sounded like the woman actually expected an answer, and that made Izuku chuckle. "Sorry, but I have no intention of sharing that with you. For now you will just have to be satisfied with the fact that I will be staying out of your way. Good luck with the raid." Izuku hung up and set his phone down. The sound of full-on cackling behind him made Izuku spin around. Kaken was standing in the hall that led to the bedrooms, bent over with laughter. "Dang, Izuku. You look like one of those stereotyped villains from the cartoons that runs everything from the shadows." "What?" Izuku's brows knit together as he tried to figure out what Kaken was thinking. "All you need is a three-piece suit and a big chair to sit in at the top of some skyscraper." The picture came together as Izuku imagined a villain mastermind sitting behind a desk cast in shadows as he made threatening phone calls. It made Izuku snort as he shared Kaken's amusement. "Maybe I should get a suit. Do you think it would make me look intimidating? With your stupid freckles and big eyes, I don't think any outfit could make you intimidating. I guess that's what I have you for." Izuku shot Kaken a smile. "You can stand behind me and glare. Anyone would be intimidated by that." "Of course they would," Kaken scoffed. "Just tell me who I need to intimidate." Izuku laughed yet again. When was the last time he laughed this much? Kaken looked smug as he moved over and leaned against the table. "When are you planning to take out the doctor?" "Oh," Izuku scratched the back of his head. "I kind of already did." "What?" "But at the meeting you said dash. I couldn't take the chance that someone would let my plans slip to him since he has helped the League a fair amount. I want to trust everyone, but they are villains," Katsuki finished for him. So when and how did you get rid of him? Actually, it was over a month ago. Shortly after recruiting Hawks. The room was lit with an eerie purple glow that emanated from the tube holding Shigaraki. It illuminated the pipes and wires all around it, and the massive amounts of machinery beyond that. Pumps, filters, synthesizing machines, and computer banks crowded the walls of the room. The doctor leaned over one of these computers. So, all that's left is for him to stabilize? Izuku questioned. Essentially, Dr. Ijiko answered. I will need to monitor and make adjustments to ensure all the modifications settle in nicely, but I finished changing his DNA and overlaying his new quirks. When he awakes, Shigaraki will be unstoppable. The man's crazed smile was audible in his voice despite facing away from Izuku. I see. And in the meantime your clone will be taking care of your other duties so you can stay focused on this. Precisely. Izuku took a deep breath and moved closer to the doctor. Thank you for taking the time to teach me all of this. Your work really is incredible. It's rare that I find someone who can keep up with me. Perhaps you will even be able to continue my work someday. I doubt it, Izuku whispered as he held a gun to Ijiko's head and pulled the trigger. Blood splattered on the computer and the pumps behind that. The doctor's body slumped to the ground. Izuku took a few deep breaths. He was okay. This had to been done. The headshot had made it easier. This way he didn't have to feel the emotions of someone dying again. The emotions just cut off. Turning to the giant tube holding Shigaraki, Izuku pulled a syringe from his pocket and injected the contents into the line that fed into Shigaraki's arm. I'm sorry, Izuku said even though the man could not hear him. It was either this or killing you. You helped me out so much, and even if it was just to use me or something like Kaken says, I'm still grateful. Wait, what was in the injection? Kaken interrupted Izuku's story. He had not even gotten to the part about taking lab equipment. Kaken probably did not need to know about that part anyway. It was some of the quirk-destroying substance I took from Overhaul. The modifications that were done to his body will still be there, making Shigaraki ridiculously strong, but he won't have any quirks to go with it. Not even his original quirk. Then you just left him in the creepy lab? What's going to happen to him? Kaken asked as he took the seat across from Izuku. The heroes know his location. They will be raiding the lab at the same time as the PLF headquarters. I set the system to automatically wake him and the Nomu up if the lab is breached in any way. Izuku got up and moved to the kitchen. Tea? Kaken nodded while staring ahead in thought. This is going to be a bloodbath. It will be, Izuku agreed as he filled up the kettle. Memories of the blood he had already shed flashed before his eyes. Overhaul, All Might, Endeavor indirectly, Dr. Ijiko. His hands were far from clean, but Kaken was right, this would be another level of bloodshed. You really okay with all this? Kaken's red eyes felt like they were burning into Izuku. Izuku turned on the stove, then turned to face his friend. If I do nothing, then the system will keep getting worse and worse. We both suffered under this system. It makes villains and beats down ordinary people. Things need to change. I am just letting people see how bad things can get so that they will realize this as well. You are getting innocent people killed, Izuku. Kaken clenched his fists on the tabletop. No. Izuku calmly got 2 mugs out. He ignored the momentary tremble of his hands. The only people I have killed are murderers. The people who could be killed in this fight are those who chose to be part of it. These people chose to be heroes or villains. I'm just letting this war happen and using it. I know you were behind All Might and Endeavor dying on the same day. Kaken glared. Izuku glanced over as he continued making the tea. I admit I arranged some things. But again, they chose to be heroes and be part of this fight. All Might was a good man. He did not deserve that. That man, Izuku gritted out as he tried to keep his voice calm, was responsible for starting me on this path. He told me I could never be a hero. He told me to give up. Then he turned around and gave his quirk to Mikumo, driving a wedge between us. All Might deserved what happened to him. For several minutes the only sound was the pouring of water and the clinking of dishes as Izuku finished the tea and brought it to the table. He sat back across from Kaken and they both just stared at their cups and watched the steam rise. Izuku was vaguely aware of the feelings swirling in Kaken. Anger gave way to shock and confusion. Izuku briefly considered pushing Kaken in the right direction, but quickly rejected the idea. I didn't know that. Kaken's voice was unusually quiet and thoughtful. There was still anger under the surface, but Izuku didn't think it was directed at him. I knew there had to be something up with Mikumo's quirks since you guys are identical twins, but I didn't know about All Might. Why did he say you couldn't be a hero? The same reason as everyone else. Izuku sighed. It's too dangerous for someone without a quirk. I should be realistic. Not that being realistic stopped everyone else from hurting me and beating me down. Hey! Kaken called and Izuku looked up to meet his gaze. He could feel guilt twisting in Kaken just like it always did when they talked about Izuku's past. His eyes, however, only shone with determination. We're gonna change all that, right? Yeah. Izuku smiled. We will make this world a better place. Spinner couldn't stop pacing around his room. He had said he would help Izuku, but now that meant betraying Shigaraki. Shigaraki, who shared Spinner's love for video games. Shigaraki, who had so much passion and drive that it pulled Spinner in. Letting the doctor be killed would likely get Shigaraki killed as well. Finally, Spinner tapped his communicator to contact the doctor. Dr. Ijiko, you there? There was a long stretch of silence that made Spinner nervous. Had Izuku already acted? Dr. Ijiko, this is Spinner. Can you hear me? Finally, after a few more seconds of silence, the doctor responded. Ah, Spinner. Sorry about that. I was in the middle of some important adjustments for Shigaraki. What did you need? Spinner let out a sigh. At least he wasn't too late. It's about Izuku. You need to be careful around him. Izuku? Dr. Ijiko hummed thoughtfully. I haven't had him come in for several weeks. I've been so focused on this latest project, you know. Is there a reason you think I should be concerned? He's broken off from the League and has his own plans. Spinner tried to convey the urgency of this threat. He plans to kill you so you can't activate the Noma and stop him. Kill me? The doctor laughed. I assure you, I would never allow that to happen. But I will take extra precautions. If he actually tries, one of my Noma will kill him. Spinner relaxed a little. Even if he felt guilty for betraying Izuku, at least Shigaraki was safe. Thank you, Doctor. Izuku glared at his laptop screen. He was thankful he thought to have La Brava help set up this program in case anyone tried to contact Dr. Ijiko, but he hadn't expected Spinner to betray him like this. The voice synthesizer seemed to have been convincing enough to avoid suspicion. He just hoped Spinner didn't try anything else. Most of the details of their plans were only told to the people needed for them. Spinner's only remaining job was to warn the PLF about the heroes attacking in time for them to fight back. If Spinner failed to do that, it would hurt Shigaraki's plans more than Izuku's. Izuku pushed the thought away. In a few days, everything would be set in motion and Spinner's betrayal would no longer matter. Katsuki smoothed down the suit Izuku had given him. It had been a little big on him, but the sewing lessons from his dad came in handy. Now it fit like a glove. At least one good thing came from having fashion designers as parents. Kaken! Izuku whined as he came out of his room in a suit as well. His tie was clutched in his hand. I can't make it look right. The memory of Mikumo back at school flashed through Katsuki's mind, making him chuckle. Must be a Midoriya trait. Your brother always had his tie in a balled-up disgrace around his neck. Katsuki took the tie and helped Izuku put it on correctly. As I thought, he said, stepping back. You still look like a nerd. Izuku let out an indignant squawk. I think I look good. I didn't say you looked bad, just that you still look like a nerd. You're not intimidating. We'll see about that. Izuku pouted. The door opened and Gentle Criminal entered. Are we ready to go? He asked as he brushed imaginary dirt from his own suit. Yep, Izuku grinned. Is La Brava all set up? Indeed. She is monitoring all areas of interest, and will keep us apprised as things develop. Izuku smiled. Sounds good. Let's get things started. On the outside, ᴂᴇᴟ may have looked calm. But the need to keep his emotions under control so Dark Shadow did not go wild was the only thing keeping him from being a bundle of nerves. The team of heroes was massive. ᴂᴇᴟ had never heard of a mission on this scale before, but the reports said that the villain group was even more massive. As he ran beside the dozens of pro heroes in the advanced team, ᴂᴇᴟ could hear his classmate freaking out next to him. I missed the rest of Class A! Kaminari screamed. Midnight tried to calm him down, but it did not seem to be working. Kaminari, ᴂᴇᴟ cut in. You scared too? He asked. ᴂᴇᴟ ignored the question and went on. During the school festival, I discovered the real you when we played guitar together. You are an incredible person. He was not sure if it helped, but they were out of time for chatting. As the heroes broke through the tree line and charged the mansion, there were already villains pouring out the front doors to face them. What's going on? Some hero yelled. They shouldn't know we're coming. ᴂᴇᴟ's heart sank. If they had lost the element of surprise, this battle just became much harder.